In that village, there was not much love for God, but he was expected to revive that love of God among the people. He knew, even before he went there, that that's the village where secularization has spread. No more spirit of prayer. What did he do? Medeviane went trembling also and fearing, but he used to rise very early every morning to pray the divine office, and then used to pass hours before the Blessed Sacrament praying for the conversion of his faithful. He said, I will first pray for the conversion of the faithful, of my faithful. I know who they are. He worked quietly, visiting the sick and the poor of the village. One of the things perhaps today is neglected. As I always tell people, I asked the parish priest whom I visited, how long have you been in this parish? He told me, 8 years, I'm a parish priest here. My next question was, how many families do you have in your parish? He said, who can know? After 8 years, he had not made the family visits. And he did not know how many Catholic families he had in his family, in his parish. Mary John Vianney took care to prepare his simple sermons and especially gave time to the spiritual direction in the confessional. But after some time, he was also tempted to abandon that parish, that village, for fear that he would himself would lose faith. Because if you live among pagans, you tend also to do as they do. People who don't pray also can influence you not to pray. But with his endless patience and humility, he persevered in that village for fear that nobody else would dare to come to pray for those poor faithful who had lost their faith. Jean-Marie Vianney remained in Ars for 40 years. And Ars became renowned as a center of prayer and reconciliation. People were coming from all over the world to go to Ars. I also made a pilgrimage to Ars. Very isolated village, even until today, but many people go there, even after his death. What type of priests do we need today in the changing world, especially a world that is tempted to go for secularism with the different ideologies we know of? Do we need men of prayer or men of the word, the so-called mundane? Do we need men of self-sacrifice and patience? The secularized society tends to discourage any change of the situation today and classifies missionaries in conservatives or traditionalists and in liberals, progressists, or modern. And of course, for a young priest, the attraction is to be called a progressist, a modern, not a conservative or traditionalist. But for the Catholic Church, what do we need? When we look at the way a person advances when one is walking, when you want to walk, one foot will go ahead. But automatically, as you go ahead, one foot remains behind, which means one who advances properly is both conservative or traditionalist and progressive. And it has to be that. If it's only one, it's very dangerous and risky. He will advance like a kangaroo. It's like a kangaroo. Perhaps the problem today is not only the number of priests, but also the quality that can fit better in today's rapidly changing situation. Perhaps a priest of yesterday can no longer cope in the situation we live today. But what type of new priest do we need who can cope with this changing society, which is losing faith, which does not pray anymore? Didn't Jesus say, without me, you can do nothing? Maybe the tendency today is to do without Jesus and try to find out our own solution, change the structures. But what about the missionaries themselves, the priests themselves? Don't they have to change something? I was reading recently one of the addresses of Pope Francis to the International Theological Symposium on Priesthood, which was held in Rome in February of 2022, just over a year ago. In that International Theological Symposium, Pope Francis said that he prefers that type of priest with a trusting acceptance of our changing reality, that trusting acceptance of our changing reality. We have to accept the changing reality, but one who anchored in the wise and living tradition of the church, which enables us to put out into the deep without fear. Anchored in the tradition of the church, we can advance into the deep without fear. And nobody is afraid that one advances, because one knows that one has his feet on the ground. Even Karl Marx had that. Karl Marx used to say that one cannot jump unless one has his feet on the ground. One has to get his feet on the ground and then jump. But sometimes we want to jump without having our feet steady on the ground. I continue. And Pope Francis continues to say, at this moment of history, I feel that Jesus is once more inviting us to put out into the deep. the whole situation we have is perhaps an invitation to put out into the deep, as Peter was told. He had not caught any fish the whole night, though he was an expert and rather a professional fisherman. The whole night he had caught nothing. And Jesus comes, who was not a fisherman, please put your nets into deep, into the sea, but far deep. At his orders, Peter did it, and he admired the results of that catch, trusting that he is the Lord of history and that with his guidance, we will discern the direction to take. And I think the Pope is quite correct that one has to be anchored in the tradition of the church, but one is sure not to jump aimlessly. Once anchored steady in the tradition of the church, one goes into the deep, but trusting in the Lord, who is the responsible of the history of the whole world. The Pope then underlines in that conference on International Theological Symposium on Priesthood, he then underlines the four traits, four qualities of priests, which a priest needs to have in the world today. For him, says a priest today needs closeness to God, closeness to his bishop, closeness to fellow priests, fraternity, and closeness to the people of God. In other words, in a spirit of fraternity at all levels. Question of closeness. I remember during my stay, when I was a young secretary of the Nuncio in Bangladesh, one day I traveled with the Archbishop, who is now dead. He died long ago. At that time, the Archbishop of the time of the capital of Bangladesh, I spent a day traveling with him. And he told me, please, he wanted to show me his diocese. And one day we stopped on the way. He told me, let us stop here. There is an old lady we have spent a lot of time without visiting. We knocked at the door. The old lady opened up the window, not the door, the window, and spoke, who is that? Ah, the Archbishop. How are you? I am okay. But you know, I became a Pentecostal because for a long time, nobody of our church visited me. And we left that house because she was no longer welcoming us. She had felt abandoned. She had not experienced that closeness of our church. And then she left. Can you imagine one who leaves the table of the children where everything's there, the 7 sacraments are there, and goes elsewhere? Sometimes it seems that the church, there is also an African proverb. Pope Francis is also good in proverbs, and he loves the African proverbs. In that occasion, he said, an African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And he continues to explain that sometimes it seems that the church is slow, and that is true. Yet, to think of it as the slowness of those who have chosen to walk in fraternity because they want to go far, also accompanying those who are least, the poor, the elderly people, but always in fraternity. That is what the Pope proposes to us, to work more on closeness, even if a priest is alone. In a big pastoral unity, you can still imitate that example of the model priest, Mary Vianney, praying for his faithful every day, remaining faithful to his prayers. Also, that gives a witness and example of a life of a man who is united with God. Then he can call others to return to God. But also, he also visited his villages, his village, little by little, and succeeded to have, with his prayer and patience and humility, to gain a few souls and friends. In conclusion, I know this is the conference, an introduction to a conference of lay people, but I've been speaking about priests and how to behave. But since priests do not fall down from heaven, or priests do not come from Rome and go and descend elsewhere, priests don't come out of the bishop's house because the archbishop has no children.
They also don't grow as mushrooms.
They don't grow as mushrooms out of nothing. They don't come down from heaven, but come from among men. You come from among men, from our families. The lay faithful can encourage the type of priest I'm speaking about, the type of priest who is close to God, close to the bishop, close to his fellow priests, and close to the faithful. They can encourage him and also promote and support vocations to that type of priesthood in their families and parish communities to meet the needs of our changing society. We have to be sure that notwithstanding everything, God has not abandoned the church. God has not abandoned the word, even the secularized word. God is there. God is there. But sometimes they feel that now, as one journalist said, now the church is going away out of the field. We are going to mold the church. I said, poor journalist. This is the church of God. And you, man, however strong you might be, you will not mold the church of God without God. As God told David in the Old Testament, when he said, I have built myself a big palace. Now I want also to build a big temple for my God. God told him, you will not be the one to construct it, but your son. David must have feared to say, will my son be a great king and a powerful king as I am, and rich as I am to build the temple? But we know it was his son Solomon who built the temple of Jerusalem because God wanted it. Thank you, listeners, and I hope that from this presentation reactions which can help us know more and more about the title of this reflection will be very useful to all listeners.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I will now request that we take a very short break, and then we'll come back and we'll listen to people who have been watching and listening in from wherever they've been. We will take a few questions and a few comments.
It's longer than I expected.
Welcome back, dear friends. At this time, feel free to give your reactions. Archbishop Kasujja is available to take comments, but also to answer some of your questions. Those who are on Zoom, feel free to raise your hand. Electronically, we will be able to spot it. We will let you in. I mean, we will allow you to speak, and then we can pick the question or comment. You can also send your message through the chat room and we will pick it as well. Archbishop, you talked about the quality of priests, not just the quantity. I know in some areas the quantity is not the big issue, but we know here the quantity is such a big issue. Here in Kampala, it may not be a very big issue, but as you go further from the city, there are places where a priest, they only see a priest like once in 3-4 months. It is a big issue. In Kampala, it is easy to go to church every Sunday or even every morning. Now, definitely, quality is very important. Do you have any observations? What do we need to do as a church to improve the quality of our priests? Not only, of course, the spirituality, but also in the training.
When you speak of the needs, it is true. In most capitals, you may find more priests because there are institutions, besides the fact that dioceses like the archdiocese here, but because of the presence of institutions, you may find a number of priests who can very easily be called upon to assist the faithful. People see them in conferences, people meet them in classrooms, even as students. But that change, what can we do? Whenever one receives the idea to become a priest, one always has a model of type of priest he would like to be from a priest he has seen. But by the time we reach the priesthood, after some 10 years or more of formation, perhaps that type of priest is outdated, slightly outdated, and you need to be more innovative than he was, because the challenges of today are no longer what they were. When I started as a priest, we had no computer, we had no mobile phone, and so on. Today, the priest...
And you engaged people directly. Now you need to engage them where they are, sometimes distracted
where they are
on their phone.
But I think what the Pope says remains valid for all. Of those of the past and the present, closeness to God, closeness to the people of God still remains.
Yes.
Whether I am a traditionalist or thinking of the old situation, or I am in church in the capital where there are more smaller churches. Here, one priest was telling me the outstations he has, which are very far away, they're about 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers away. I said, my God, in Algeria, the distance between one parish and a next parish is over 300 kilometers in the Sahara Desert. And also, I learned that in Botswana, which is part of Kalahari Desert, also the distances are more or less the same. One crosses areas over 200 kilometers. People who have never had a chance, even for several years, to meet a priest. But then, what we need, whether we are few or many, the closeness is always needed. This is exactly what the patron of priests did, Jean Vianney. He was alone, and he was able to visit little by little, besides the hours he spent in prayer, praying for the conversion of his faithful. He had time to visit some of the faithful he could visit. But also, he approached his faithful through the confessional. Today, not many have the patience to visit, to remain in the confessional, even when nobody comes. Yes.
Archbishop, there are a few comments from the chats. We won't have a lot of time, but let me pick some of these. Somebody called Emmanuel Sanya on Zoom. He said, thank you, Archbishop, for such an authentic, broad, yet simple message you have posed to us. What caught my attention most was the Duke in Altum message on the remodeling the priests of our changing times.
Yes.
He says, I like the Kabondo model. Kabondo is the best Christian community where we get a chance to meet up as Christians, especially in the months of May and October of Mother Mary and the Rosary. It really brings the Catholic Church get closer to the community. How can this model better be implemented at all parishes and sub-parishes? I've noticed that the Kabondo, the best Christian community spirit, is more at the sub-parish than
at the center. That is a very nice observation. I don't know if he has heard the question. The one who has asked.
Yes.
He was listening to you.
They are listening.
Yeah. That is a very nice observation to say that Duke in Altum is part of the answer. I don't know if the one who has posed the question is an ex-student of SMAC, because that is the motto of SMAC, of St. Mary's College, Chisubi, Duke in Altum. I think that is one of the things all of us should look for. Because that Peter, who was made be the pastor of my church, did that because he listened to his master. He had the feeling that his first feeling was that he was an experienced and a professional fisherman to catch fish. But when he began, he failed to catch the fish, and someone else comes and tells him, Duke in Altum, throw the net in the deep. He was hesitating, but he accepted. Why did he accept? Out of obedience. Obedience demands humility.
Yes.
Obedience demands trust of the person who is telling you. And perhaps this second part is very important, to trust in God. Things that we think are impossible, for God are possible.
Archbishop, we have a hand from Mr. Anthony Matega, and I think he will be our last one. The others, you will apologize, we'll not be able to take them due to time, but let's briefly listen to Mr. Anthony Matega.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the Archbishop, and I'm very grateful for your presentation. My question is, you are lucky that you were ordained shortly after the Second Vatican Council II had just been opened up in the early 70s. You have been a bishop. You have been a bishop and a nuncio, and you are celebrating 50 years as a priest. You have had a chance of being in Europe and even in Africa. In your opinion, is there fundamentally some fundamental differences between the African priest serving possibly in Uganda vis-a-vis a priest who is serving in Europe? Because our circumstances look to be totally different, much as the gospel is the same. Thank you, Excellency.
The missionaries are different. That I also notice. Yeah. But from my personal experience, I have seen, as Mother Teresa used to say, the best gift to a country is a missionary. She does not say an African missionary, a European missionary, or Asian missionary, or an American missionary. She a best gift the church can give to a country is the missionary. And I feel, and this I used to share it with some priests, African priests whom I met in mission, on the mission, that we should not be like St. Peter in the boat that was sinking. When Peter was in the boat and he saw Jesus coming, he told Jesus, I do not aware that we are sinking. There was a storm. What did Jesus say? Come out of the boat and come walk towards me. He feared. There was a storm already, fearing to stay in the boat. He was going to, and now he tells him, come and walk on the waters. That would be even worse.
Yes, of course.
But there we see, as we are sinking, the thing that when you capture my idea that when we look at our feet, we feel that we are sinking. But when we look at Jesus, we can walk even on the waters. Where we feel secure in the boat, or rather more secure in the boat, it can sometimes be even less secure than walking on the waters, because we are looking at Jesus. That's what Peter did. He went out because Jesus called him and he said, I trust in your call. He walked and the storms stopped because of that trust. So to say an African priest here, if he gathers and works for the qualities we have perhaps underlined here, that type of priest who was close to God, close to the people, close to the other priests, he lives in fraternity, they would adore him wherever he goes. I have personally lived that. The time I went, for instance, I was a young priest at age 33 when I went as secretary to the Nuncio in Argentina. I was only 33, and I stayed there for just over 3 years. Immediately, I was asked by the Archbishop to assist in one of the communities and say Mass every day, and that I continued. Later on, university students asked me to say their Sunday Mass because they wanted to have a particular Mass, not to feel that they can have a homily which suits them as university students, rather than going to the parishes where the homily sometimes is not for them, for their level. And there I saw nobody was looking at me as an African priest. Everybody was looking at me as a priest. And that gave me a lot of confidence.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Archbishop Augustine Kasujja, Apostolic Nuncio. On behalf of all the people who have been watching and listening from Uganda Catholic Television, from Zoom, from YouTube, I want to thank you very much for what you've been able to share with us. It was a short time, but it was very deep. So we won't have more time. Your Excellency, I will request that you give us a blessing, and that will end our program today.
I thank you also for having organized this evening. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May the Almighty God bless you all, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
So the time